The Hubble Space Telescope presented us with a glimpse into the farthest reaches of space yet seen by humans. It was an occasion for wonder. The photograph, named the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, features an extraordinary panorama of galaxies in various stages of development. Viewing this display of cosmic abundance, one author commented, "Science lifts the curtain on a tiny piece of night and finds 10,000 galaxies hidden there, each one a community of 100 billion suns, each sun a potential home star to, say, a dozen worlds." Another said, "It's amazing. Humans have been around for over 100,000 years, and we simply didn't know about this until recently." Something that has existed from the beginning, or something new but until now unseen, appears before us, and we are overtaken by wonder. Something which is so exquisitely beautiful, like the sight of a rose-colored dawn becoming a golden path reaching across the lake to greet us. And we are filled with silent wonder. Wonder is like a Geiger counter which tells us that buried there somewhere is a treasure, and that treasure is God. All at once, it can take us to a place of humility and profound connection. There is mystery. We may be plunged into wonder by yet another demonstration of the undeserved and enduring love of a spouse, the vulnerable dignity of an aging parent, the flaming leaves of a sugar maple in autumn, or by the silent perfection of a sleeping child. But those who are wise know that they cannot hold on to the experience of wonder. Rather, they let it open them to the one who has given this gift. When we let that sensation of joy deepen, it connects us to the very source of life. We discover a widened sense of life's horizons and possibilities. Eyes rinsed in wonder take us to the possibility of being more truly human. For theologian Thomas Merton, wonder happened for him when he was walking the streets of Louisville, and it was as if he had awakened from a dream of separateness which he had lived for most of his life. He said, "I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that they were mine and I theirs, and that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers." Wonder happens when something or someone transcends common sense expectations and somehow communicates the mystery of God's presence. Moses descended from Mount Sinai, and Scripture tells us that his face was aglow with God's presence. Orthodox Christians believe that Jesus himself did not change at the Transfiguration, but rather the eyes of the disciples were opened to see truly the stunning reality of Jesus' identity and who he really was. So with us, there are those moments when we are surprised by the luminous presence of God in the midst of a usually opaque world, and we know God is here. God is here reminding us that we are part of a mysterious reality which breaks through to us, healing us, gives us strength we had no idea we could have, and giving us a push to risk more real loving. These moments don't last very long, and often they come to us in quite ordinary events, but their impact can last a lifetime. Sometimes it happens in the midst of tremendous struggle, like Jacob, who was wrestling all night and woke up to say, God is in the midst of this place. It is not just seeing, it is seeing beyond the surface. This seeing with the eyes of the heart is what feeds our soul. Dag Hammarskjöld said, God does not die on the day when we cease to believe in a personal deity, but we die on the day when our lives cease to be illuminated by the steady radiance, renewed daily, of wonder, the source of which is beyond all creation. People often think that the basic command of religion is do this and don't do that. It isn't. It's look. Look and wonder. Learn to give attention to the world around you, and the rest follows. We know that God's presence is in fact everywhere, and yet we recognize God close to us most clearly in the person of Jesus. All through history, artists have portrayed God's grace with a luminous presence wrapped around people's heads and streaming down into the middle of things. That is what we see in image after image in the birth of Christ. That is some of the fascination of Christmas. In this picture of a baby wrapped in light, we find a world in which the infinite one, the one who created the galaxies as yet unknown, comes right into the most ordinary of human life. And in the circle of light around Jesus, we recognize the odd birthings of community too. Outcast shepherds and strangers from afar, angels and animals come into a holy communion. That same light that brought people out of darkness as he touched and spoke to people of life, which was like a banquet to which all were invited, no matter what their history or their social standing or even their degree of spiritual perfection. They all were honored guests at God's table. Seeing themselves as God's beloved, they began to see one another differently. The beggar on the road, the woman with 7 husbands, the tax collector who had cheated on those under his control, all were worthy of love. The circle of light around Jesus continued to flow through his community and keep entering our vulnerable human existence. In his life, ours takes on a deeper purpose. In his love, we discover that we are more connected than we dreamed. And this is the challenge Christ brings, that we wake up from the illusion that we are separate from one another, and that we are separate from God, and that we begin to see ourselves and one another in God's light. Here's a true story about the God in us and among us. It comes from a parishioner of Memorial Church in Baltimore who had moved to the Middle East, and he had one of those experiences of wonder in the most unlikely and ordinary places. He wrote, "I passed the last evening of Ramadan on a ferry crossing the Red Sea to the Sinai. Some friends and I were traveling to the Egyptian beach party town of Dahab for the feast that follows the end of the holy month. 2 boats make the crossing. The fast boat is a slick, fairly expensive commuter service, and then the slow boat, which is a cargo freighter that also happens to take passengers. Our bus arrived too late for the fast boat, so with some trepidation, we bought tickets for the freighter. The boarding dock was crowded with Egyptian migrant workers waiting for jobs or perhaps coming off of them. Some squatted on the hot pavement, while others shouted at one another or at the dock workers, or else sat in silence, squeezing themselves into the tiny corners of shade etched out by the noonday sun. Stepping aboard the boat felt like stepping onto a plague ship. Every inch of the oil-slicked black deck was covered with sprawled human figures. Barefoot old women sat slumped on blankets against the rails and crowded into the narrow walkways like so many bundles of rags, while men with yellow nails and tired faces tried to sleep. Crowds of eyes followed us as we picked our way over the bodies, vacant, disinterested eyes, bleary with exhaustion or sickness. We found a space on the top level against the side of a large engine shaft, belching gasoline fumes across the deck. We spoke little. No one mentioned the eyes around us. We walked to the railing to watch the red ember of the sun settle behind the mountains of the Sinai Desert. The sun was beautiful as it sank into the cradle of rust-colored stone. And that was when I smelled something. The odor, faint and tantalizing, was of roasting vegetables. And in a moment that seemed like an hour, I realized how many things I had just got wrong. The deck below us came alive with figures sitting up on their blankets, chatting, laughing, eagerly fingering bottles of water, packs of cigarettes. The shapeless bundles were producing boxes of figs and dates and rounds of cheese and bags heavy with thick bread. I finally got it, that people around me were poor, but they were not hopeless, helpless, or lost in the abyss of poverty and despair. They just hadn't eaten in 24 hours because it was Ramadan. "Hey there," a man said from the deck below. "Where are you from?" "We're American," I said, fearing the worst and feeling trapped. "Very good," he shouted. "Welcome to our country. Welcome to Egypt. I wish you pleasure." "Oh God," muttered one of my friends under his breath, who had lived a long time in the Arab world. "What are they going to do, stone us now?" Another friend said, "No, but if we keep talking to them, they're going to invite us to dinner with them, and they can't afford it." Smiling back a greeting, we turned away from the railing, but it was too late. There was the man leaning over us with a smile, holding out a huge tub of dates, passing it around and gesturing for us to each take some, and then smiling and passing it around again. When we had packed food for the trip, but it had spoiled, and we had nothing to offer in return. Suddenly, we were the ones being looked at pityingly by the feasting Egyptians, who offered us olives and water and sugar dates. One of them handed us an entire wheel of cheese. And then a man I had stared at was back with his friends, smiling as he presented us a bag stuffed with thick, crusty bread, which he shoved into our hands with a smile. He didn't speak a word of English, but repeated over and over the phrase, "Allah wa aslan," Arabic for welcome. This American man came to see that his world was too small, that his assumptions were not true, and that he belonged in some new way to the human community made real in those crusty slices of bread. God came to him in this unplanned feast and gave him a widened horizon. Those eyes, rinsed in wonder, had opened up to a new possibility of being more truly human. Perhaps your eyes are weary tonight, or dulled by worry, perhaps lacking focus or filled with sorrow. or just filled with distraction. Or perhaps you are seeing the presence of God all around you. However you come, tonight is the time we focus on the light of God that turns up in the most unlikely settings. Tonight, we sit still and remember that we are on holy ground all the time. Tonight, we lift the curtain on a tiny piece of night and find 10,000 galaxies hidden there. Tonight, we are invited to become witness to the awesome light of Christ that draws us into a new community, a new identity, and a new world. Thanks be to God.